In this video, we'll be revealing the hidden trap in the 4% rule that's keeping millions of Americans from retiring when they actually could, and why this safe withdrawal strategy might be costing you years of your life in retirement. For decades, retirees have been given a simple, supposedly foolproof rule for a successful retirement. They call it the 4% rule. And in a world of complex financial decisions, a simple rule feels like a safe harbor, right? But the truth is, this one-size-fits-all advice can be one of the most dangerous things for your retirement security. And that's why we're making this video today, to expose the fundamental problems with the 4% rule and show you how understanding flexibility can help you retire years earlier than you thought possible. Let's get right into it. Part 1, understanding the 4% rule, right? So what exactly is the 4% rule? And why did it become so popular in the first place, right? Everyone seems to be talking about this. The rule itself is simple. It's a distribution strategy that says on the day you retire, you withdraw 4% of your initial portfolio value, and then you take that specific dollar amount and just simply adjust it for inflation each and every year that follows throughout your lifetime in retirement. It initially became pretty much financial gospel for a fairly straightforward reason. It came from a financial advisor named William Bengen back in 1994. Bengen was trying to answer a simple but terrifying question for his own clients, right? How much can I spend without running out of money? Sound familiar? What he did is he looked back at the worst financial periods in modern history, the Great Depression, the high inflation of the 1970s, and what he did is he ran simulations trying to find a withdrawal rate that could survive even those worst case scenarios. His conclusion was that a 4% initial withdrawal rate adjusted for inflation each year was the highest rate that never failed over any 30-year period in historical data. This became incredibly popular because it was simple and it was backed by data, and it gave people a feeling of certainty in an uncertain world. Now, let's see how this works in practice, right? Let's meet Chris. He's retiring today with a portfolio of $1.4 million. Using the 4% rule, his first year withdrawal would be $56,000. In year 2, assuming that there's 3% inflation, that withdrawal would increase to $57,680. In year 3, that would be over $59,400, and so on and so on. A straight, predictable line going up every year with inflation, regardless of what happens in the market. It's super simple on the surface, right? But as we're about to see, that historical simplicity is its biggest flaw in the modern world. The reason so many people cling to this is because it's psychological, right? It plays into heuristics and cognitive biases, where the difficulty of making high consequence decisions when faced with complex options forces your brain to create mental shortcuts that can have dire long-term consequences. The 4% rule is an oversimplified, hard and fast rule that plays into those heuristics, and it completely ignores the real-world trade-offs. Let's break down the 8 specific problems with this approach one by one. So the first problem, it's too rigid, right? The rule is a linear, inflexible formula that doesn't follow normal spending behavior. It's sticking to it is like trying to follow a crash diet for 30 years. It's extremely difficult to adhere to in the real world. And this is a problem because real life isn't linear, right? Unexpected expenses happen and your spending desires can change as you age. A rigid rule that doesn't bend will eventually break, leaving you with no guidance. Think about it like this, right? Your plan says you can spend exactly $4,000 this month, but then your furnace dies in the middle of the winter and you need to spend $7,000 on a new one. What do you do for the next 3 months? The rule doesn't give you an answer. It just breaks the moment that it meets real life or any sort of resistance. Problem number 2 is that the 4% rule assumes a 30-year retirement. The original study was based on a fixed 30-year timeline. This is a huge issue because your retirement could easily be shorter or, more importantly, much longer. The rule isn't calibrated for your specific lifespan. Imagine you retire at 60 and you are in great health. At age 91, you're still going strong, but your 30-year plan has just expired, right? On the flip side, what if you only live to be 85? You might be looking back with regret at all the trips that you didn't take in your 60s because you were saving for that future that, for you, just never arrived. And then problem number 3, it assumes that you have a 50-50 portfolio. This is important to note. The 4% rule assumed a very specific portfolio of 50% stocks and 50% bonds. This is a flaw because no two retirees have the exact same investment portfolio or risk tolerance. Your unique mix of assets might behave very differently than this one specific allocation, right? So let's say your portfolio is more aggressive. Maybe you're in 70% stocks because you have a higher risk tolerance. And in a great year, the 4% rule forces you to underspend and leave huge gains on the table. And in a bad year, you don't have that 50% bond cushion that the rule was based on, and it makes your 4% withdrawal far riskier than the original study suggested. Problem number 4, it's based only on historical data. You see, the rule's success is based entirely on looking backward at historical US market data. And while history is a useful guide, it rarely repeats exactly. The future could bring economic conditions, good or bad, that are going to be very different from the past. The 4% rule says you could have survived the high inflation of the 70s, but what if the next decade for us brings a different challenge, like a long period of stagnant, sideways market growth? Relying on a plan that's designed for yesterday's crises provides a false sense of security for tomorrow's challenges. Problem number 5, it assumes 100% confidence is necessary. And this rule is intentionally and overly conservative to achieve a near 100% success rate in historical simulations. And this is a problem because not all of life's decisions require 100% certainty, right? Demanding absolute certainty in your financial plan forces you to spend far less than you safely could have. This is like refusing to leave your house because there's a 1% chance of rain, right? To guarantee that you'll never get wet, you miss out on all of the days with sunshine. That's the equivalent here. The 4% rule's obsession with certainty forces you to miss out on years of potential life experiences, all to protect against a worst-case scenario that may never happen. Problem number 6, it ignores portfolio performance. The 4% rule dictates that your withdrawal amounts increase with inflation, not market returns, regardless of whether your portfolio had a great year or a terrible one. And this is dangerous as it potentially forces you to sell more assets when their prices are low during a market downturn. This is known as sequence of returns risk, and it can permanently damage your portfolio's ability to recover. Imagine your portfolio drops 25% in a bear market. If you're actually following the 4% rule, it will still tell you to take your full inflation-adjusted withdrawal. This forces you to sell your investments when they are at their lowest point, permanently locking in those losses and crippling your portfolio's ability to recover. Problem number 7, it doesn't include taxes or fees. The 4% rule is a pre-tax, pre-fee calculation. It fails to consider where your assets are located, right? Are they tax-free, tax-deferred, or in taxable accounts? This is a massive oversight. A 4% withdrawal from a traditional IRA is completely different from a 4% withdrawal from a Roth IRA. That net amount you can actually spend varies dramatically. Let's say you calculate your 4% withdrawal is at $60,000, right? You go to make your plans, but then you realize that after federal and state taxes on your traditional IRA withdrawal, you only have $48,000 to spend. It's a lot less than 60 grand. Your entire budget is going to be thrown off from day one because the rule ignored the single largest expense that most retirees have, taxes. And then problem 8, it creates more questions than answers. The 4% rule is a strict system that provides no guidance when your real life deviates from its actual plan. And life is never a straight line, right? When a surprise expense occurs, the rule doesn't tell you how to adjust to it. Let's say you follow the rule for 5 years, but then your daughter decides she's going to get married and you want to contribute $25,000 to the wedding. The rule gives you zero framework for this. Do you skip withdrawals for the next couple of months? Do you sell extra stock? The rule's silence on these real-life decisions leaves you feeling stressed and uncertain, which is the exact opposite of what a good plan should do, right? These 8 issues really boil down to 3 core problems. First, there is a potential of you dying with a large amount of unspent money, leading to regret over being too conservative. If our retiree Chris earns just a 6% return on his portfolio, the 4% rule would leave him with almost $3 million at the end of his 30-year retirement. If he gets 8%, averages in returns, he'd have over $8 million. Imagine the regret you'd have passing away with $8 million living off of such a tight budget. Second, it's the surprise expense problem. We already talked about this. If Chris needs $30,000 in home repairs and his planned $56,000 withdrawal suddenly becomes $86,000, his distribution rate jumps from 4% to 6%, and the 4% rule gives him zero guidance on what to do next. And the third, it often sets retirees up for failure or disappointment at the end of their lives. So if the 4% rule is so flawed, then what's the alternative, right? The answer is to move away from a rigid standalone rule and toward a more human distribution strategy that provides a complete framework for decision-making throughout your retirement. And before we get into that strategy, now that you understand these issues with the 4% rule, if you want to see how this applies to your specific situation, click the link below to book a call, and we will personally guide you on how to optimize your retirement plan as a whole. Okay, the distribution strategy that provides a complete framework for decision-making throughout your retirement, it's called a guardrail strategy. Its purpose is to provide an easy-to-follow framework that helps you maximize the value of your assets, spend safely, and facilitate your legacy goals. Let's do a deep dive into how that works. The process starts by anchoring your plan to reality. That means calculating your portfolio income needs, or your PIN as we call it. This is the amount that you need to withdraw from your portfolio every year after you account for guaranteed income like Social Security or a pension. But we want to go a step further with this, right? You should break your PIN down into two critical categories. The first being your essential expenses. These are your needs, your mortgage, your property taxes, utilities, groceries, and then you have your discretionary spending. These are your wants, travel, dining out, any hobbies that you might have. The distinction that we have here is going to be the key that unlocks your entire strategy. Your total PIN becomes the foundation for your initial withdrawal. From there, you set your guardrails. You have an upper bound where portfolio growth allows you to increase spending, and a lower bound where a portfolio decline tells you that it's time to make a predefined spending cut. This is crucial because it builds an adaptability based on your real life needs and real-time market conditions. It provides a framework that is both responsive to the market and protective of your core lifestyle. Let's go back to our retiree Chris with his $1.4 million portfolio. His initial withdrawal would be based on his PIN, which we'll say is $70,000 a year. We would break this down and find out, $45,000 of this is for essential needs and $25,000 is discretionary. His guardrail plan is built around this. If his portfolio ever hit the lower guardrail, his plan is to not panic. It's just to simply reduce his discretionary spending by a preset amount, while his $45,000 of essential income remains untouched. This framework provides two incredible benefits that the 4% rule simply does not match. Benefit one, spending flexibility with peace of mind. The guardrails provide clear rules for when to adjust spending, but those adjustments only apply to your discretionary spending. Your essential expenses, they're protected. If your portfolio hits the lower bound, the rule isn't to just slash your budget nilly-willy. You're going to make some pre-planned, modest cuts to your travel or dining or your hobby budget. This provides a massive psychological benefit, right? You know that no matter what the market does, your core lifestyle is still secure. And benefit number two, increased spending, especially in early retirement. This is even more powerful. Because you have this built-in flexibility to safely reduce spending during downturns, the framework allows you to safely withdraw significantly more money from the start. Let's go back to Chris's scenario here. Here is a detailed year-by-year hypothetical projection of how these two scenarios could play out over his 30-year retirement. Now, to illustrate this, we're going to use a hypothetical but realistic 30-year market scenario that includes periods of growth, a moderate correction, and one significant bear market. So let's take a look at our simulation assumptions. Again, we have Chris, he's age 60, about to retire. We're going to plan out his retirement duration for 30 years, which puts him out to age 90. His starting portfolio is $1.4 million and a 50-50 stock bond allocation. We want to consider that 4% rule. Inflation will put it at averaging at 3% per year. Now, some key market events at year 4, which will be his age 63, there will be a moderate market correction, which will be a negative 15% return. And at year 15, we'll have a major bear market, which will be a negative 25% return. In scenario A, Chris follows the 4% rule, withdrawing $56,000 in year 1 and increasing that amount by 3% for inflation each year, regardless of the market's performance. At year 4, that market returns negative 15%. His portfolio takes a hit, but the 4% rule still forces Chris to withdraw his inflation-adjusted amount of $61,193. This act of selling assets in a steep decline significantly hampers his portfolio's ability to recover. Then at age 74, year 15, that market suffers a major 25% loss. This is a catastrophic event for a retiree following a rigid plan, and his portfolio's value plummets. But the 4% rule and his needs provide no flexibility, and he has to withdraw his planned $84,884, which again forces him to sell a much larger percentage of his portfolio at a deeper discount. This action causes irreversible damage. And then years 16 to 30, so for the rest of his life, while the market eventually recovers, the combination of large forced withdrawals during the 2 major downturns has done its damage. The portfolio is struggling to keep pace with an ever-increasing inflation-adjusted withdrawal. In the 4% rule's 30-year summary, it ends up being that his total amount withdrawn is about $2.7 million, and his final portfolio value at age 90 is only about $250,000, which is critically low with a higher risk of depletion if Chris lives any longer. On top of that, the psychological experience, extreme stress during market downturns with a high degree of fear about outliving his money in those later years. Now let's take a look at the scenario where Chris follows the guardrail strategy. Here, in scenario B, Chris follows the guardrail strategy, starting with a higher $70,000 withdrawal, but with preset rules to cut discretionary spending during downturns. So again, in year 4 at age 63, the guardrail strategy provides a stronger shield when the market returns a negative 15%. Here, the plan activates and Chris cuts his spending only to his essential needs of $45,000. By withdrawing significantly less money during that steeper decline, he preserves more of his capital that leaves a larger base from which to recover. And then years later, at year 15 or age 74, the market again returns at negative 25%. And while that's alarming, it's the exact scenario the guardrail framework was built for. Instead of panicking, Chris follows his plan, and he again reduces his withdrawal to only to cover his essential needs for that year. This defensive action provides a powerful buffer, protecting his portfolio from the worst of the damage and preventing that catastrophic forced selling that occurred in that 4% rule scenario. So now, from years 16 to 30 or ages 75 to 90, because the guardrail strategy protected his principal during those 2 downturns earlier in retirement, Chris's portfolio recovers with a much more strength and momentum, and he's able to confidently continue his inflation-adjusted withdrawals throughout the rest of his retirement. Now, what was the guardrail strategy's 30-year summary? Total amount withdrawn, approximately $3.1 million, and his final portfolio value at age 90 is about $1.3 million. The psychological experience of using the guardrail system, he's got confidence and control. Chris knows that his plan is designed to handle severe stress, which allows him to weather market storms without panic. This simulation shows that the guardrail strategy isn't just about a higher probability of success, it's about achieving a better outcome in nearly every measurable way. Chris was able to spend over $400,000 more throughout his retirement and still leave behind a legacy more than twice as large, all while experiencing far less stress. In addition to that, with the 4% rule, if Chris lives past age 90, even if he were to cap withdrawals at $90,000 a year, his portfolio would have a much higher chance of running out of money. The benefits of this framework go far beyond the numbers on a spreadsheet. The most important return on any investment, though, is your peace of mind. A retirement plan can be mathematically perfect, but if it causes you daily stress, it hasn't exactly brought you a relaxing retirement. A guardrail framework is designed to reduce anxiety and increase confidence. First, it conquers decision fatigue. The guardrail framework eliminates the stress guesswork of retirement spending, and it provides a clear, pre-agreed upon if-then plan, right? If then else. If the market hits the lower guardrail, you make that specific modest cut to your discretionary spending. There's no debate, there's no panic, and there's no friction to it all. It turns a moment of high anxiety into a simple, pre-planned action. Second, it gives you permission to spend. Many diligent savers find it incredibly difficult to shift that accumulating wealth over to enjoying it, right? The upper guardrail is a powerful psychological tool that solves for this. When your portfolio performs well and hits that upper bound, the plan gives you explicit, data-driven permission to give yourself a raise. It's a green light telling you that you can and should spend more to enjoy the fruits of your labor without feeling guilty or anxious about it. And finally, it provides a playbook for panic. Again, the biggest fear for most retirees is a major market crash that results in them running out of money. The lower guardrail provides a clear, manageable plan of action during a downturn. Your job isn't to worry about the global economy. Your job is to follow your plan of trimming back on your discretionary spending for that short period of time. Because you've already separated your wants from your needs, you know that your core lifestyle is secure. This transforms a potentially overwhelming event into a controllable action. And again, if you want to discover exactly how these flexible withdrawal strategies apply to your situation and determine your personalized safe withdrawal rate, click the link below and book a call with us, and we'll show you the optimal way to plan retirement for your situation. Okay, so as we've seen, the 4% rule is a rigid, standalone rule that's too conservative and too difficult to manage in the real world. The guardrail strategy is different. It's a complete framework for decision-making that adapts with your life and the markets. Having a reliable framework to follow, one that protects your essential needs while giving you the flexibility with your wants, is the key to navigating the uncertainties of a 30-plus year retirement with confidence. It's what transforms a simple pot of money into a sustainable, stress-free income plan, right? And most importantly, it enables you to withdraw significantly more money from your assets, particularly in the earlier, more active years of retirement, without compromising long-term security. Now that you understand the hidden trap in the 4% rule and how spending flexibility can help you retire years earlier than traditional calculations suggest, you can make informed decisions about your early retirement timing based on your actual circumstances rather than overly conservative rules. And if you want to discover exactly how flexible withdrawal strategies apply to your situation and determine your personalized safe withdrawal rate, click on the link below and book that call with us, and we'll show you the optimal way to plan your retirement for your situation. Until next time, take care.